औज़ुबिल्लाहि मिनश्शैतानिर्रजीम बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम रब्बि शरह ली सदरी व यस्सिर ली अमरी वहलुल उक़्दतम मिन लिसानी यफ़क़हू क़ौली. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Dr. Ahmed Raza Khan, and today we'll be continuing with the series of autopsy examination, and the second short essay question in this series, which is of importance, is autopsy protocol. What is the requirement, the legal requirement for the conduction of medico-legal autopsy? What documents are required for that, and out of that, which documents are absolutely mandatory and which documents are optional and only presented when available? All this will be discussed in this presentation. So the legal documentation for medico-legal autopsy, number one is the police docket or the authority letter. Police docket is an absolute necessity. It's an absolute mandatory document. Despite of that the doctor who is appointed in the teaching institute or where the medico-legal duties are allotted to that doctor is an authorized medical officer under section 299C of PPC. Despite of that, despite of being an authorized medical officer, still there are legal requirements. And on the top of the list is the police docket. Without the police docket, even an authorized medical officer is not supposed to touch the body. He is not going to go ahead with the medico-legal examination, whether of the living or of the dead individual, without the presence of an authority letter. There are times when there are some law and order situations, like there might be a blast in the city, there might be a sectarian killing in the city, there might be any law and order situation in the city, and in that case, higher officials of police are in your office. It may be SPCD or even up to the level of IG police. They are present in your office, and sometimes that on the television the news is just shown that the funeral of the so and so people, like maybe some police constables died in their incidents, their funeral will be conducted at like couple of hours after the incidents. So that's a very short time, and in that short time the police has not yet provided you with the legal documents. And at that time, if the police officials, if the SP city or the IG police just tells you, doctor, go ahead with the medico-legal examination, and the police documents are just coming, they are following your examination, go ahead, as the time of the funeral has been announced, you just tell that police official politely that whatever you are stating verbally, please give me that in writing. You just tell him that he is the one who is going to issue the order. Why don't he just give you that in writing, sign it and stamp it, and then you are authorized to conduct the medico-legal examination. Just remember, please, 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 all the students and all the doctors all over Pakistan who are conducting the medico-legal examination, whether of the living or of the dead individual, you are not going to conduct an examination without the presence of the police docket, until and unless a police docket is present on your table physically. You are not going to go ahead with that. You are not going to go ahead with the examination, as in forensic, trust me, verbal order is no order. Later on, when you are going to be in the court for court evidence regarding this case, there is going to be nobody there to defend you. That SPCD, that IG police is not going to accompany you to the court when after a couple of years later you are going to go for court evidence in that case regarding that medico-legal autopsy you conducted. And there, how will you defend that? Why did you conduct an autopsy without authorization? So trust me, get everything in writing, and documentation in medico-legal work is absolutely mandatory. Number two is the FIR, the first information report. Let me correlate it for your ease with the clinical side. when the students or the doctors go to the clinical wards and a patient is admitted there, and you just ask the patient about the problem that he is suffering from, and you write it as history of present illness. You write his complaints in chronological order, and that gives you the information as to what happened to the patient and how you're going to manage that patient. Similarly, FIR gives you the complete details of the incidents. What happened? What incidents occurred? When did it occur? When was police informed? When did police arrive at the crime scene? What and who observed the incidents? The witnesses, the ocular account of the witnesses. All those statements are mentioned in the first information report, and it is the medico legal history. So it is absolutely necessary that you should be provided with the first information report before the conduction of medico legal autopsy. Then the third mandatory requirement and the third mandatory document is inquest form. Inquest forms are of three categories. One is concerned with the natural death. That is the form A or the Alif form. It gives you the information that the death most probably occurred under natural circumstances, and police just wants to rule out any suspicious activity. Then second category of the inquest form is the form B or the Bay form, that is related with the unnatural death due to trauma. There is any injury that occurs due to either firearm weapon, blunt means or sharp edge weapon, road traffic accident, drowning, ligature strangulation, manual strangulation, etc. All these kind of deaths are covered under the inquest form category B. And thirdly is the inquest form C or the GEAM form, that is related with the poisoning. When the police suspects that the individual has been poisoned, they provide you with the GEAM form or the form C of the inquest form category. Now, inquest form, what does it contain? It contains the entire information, like from where the body was recovered, whether the police recovered the body from the crime scene, whether the police procured the body from the hospital where the patient died after treatment, and then later on all the details of the body are given. The identifiers are mentioned in the inquest form. Those people that identified the body, the clothes are mentioned, the blood staining, the blood soaking of the clothes, the tears, holes or cuts of the clothes, every detail that is mentioned in the inquest form. Later on, all the injuries are stated in the inquest form, like how many injuries were there on the body that were observed by the police. Then further information is provided in the inquest form, like what was the build of the individual, what was the apparent cause, like as if there was a ligature tied all around the neck, that ligature material is mentioned, the apparent cause of death is mentioned. So all these things are the information is provided in the inquest form. So it is a mandatory document that should accompany the body before the postmortem examination. Then medical legal certificate, and in the bracket I have written where applicable. Sometimes the individual survives the attack and he is taken to any nearby hospital. There he is treated and he is managed, and as the incidence is of some sort of fight, whether firearm injury, whether blunt trauma, whether sharp edge, whether road traffic accident, people get their case registered as medico legal case. So the doctor who has noted down the injuries in the medico legal certificate, that is to be provided to the doctor who is conducting the postmortem examination or the autopsy examination, because by and large it's almost every time a separate doctor. It's not the same doctor. It's a very rare chance that the same doctor conducts the autopsy who has conducted the medico legal certificate, that the patient reported in the same hospital and the same mortuary the autopsy examination was conducted. It's a very rare chance, like 1 in a million. Otherwise, the doctor who is conducting the medical legal certificate examination is separate, and the doctor who is conducting the autopsy examination is separate. So the injuries detail are to be provided to the doctor who is conducting the autopsy examination, so that he can correlate his own findings with the injuries, and if there are some other findings on the body, which will be discussed in the next part. Then death certificate. Death certificate is again extremely important regarding two columns in the autopsy report. One is the time between the injury and the death, and the second is the time between the death and the postmortem. Now, the time between the injury and the death, in case of, like, for example, in case of coma, we say that the death was immediate. Time between injury and death was immediate. In case of asphyxia, the time between injury and death is stated as 3 to 5 minutes. And then in the time between injury and death, in case of syncope or hemorrhage, we say like a few minutes, 10 to 15 minutes, or up to 20 minutes. But in case of the individual, when he was admitted in the hospital, the patient stayed there, like, let's say for example, like for about a couple of hours. Let's say for example, the incidents occurred at 11 a.m. on 1st of the May, and patient stayed in the hospital for about a couple of hours, and he expired on 1:15 p.m. So in that case, the time between the injury and the death is to be written as hospital death, and the time between the death and the postmortem is calculated in exact minutes. So that is going to be 2 hours and 15 minutes, since he was admitted on 11 a.m. and expired on 1:15 p.m. So the time between the death and the postmortem is going to be 2 hours and 15 minutes. So that is the significance of the death certificate that is to be provided in case of hospital death. Lastly are the treatment notes. Again, if the patient was admitted, he underwent some surgery, he was hurriedly shifted to the operation theatre, he was operated upon, and there are times when chest intubation is required, there are times when laparotomy is conducted, there are times when colostomy is done. All these findings are present on the body, but these are to be then correlated with the treatment notes. Now here is the part where I said that in the medical legal certificate I'll be discussing it later on. In this case, when the autopsy examination doctor is writing the postmortem report, he is going to correlate the injuries mentioned in the medical legal certificate with the findings that he found on the body regarding the injuries. Like for example, if there might have been 4 firearm injuries, 2 entry wounds and 2 exit wounds, they are to be compared with the medical legal certificate injuries and correlated and mentioned as such in the postmortem report. And the 2 other holes, if present on the body, one is of chest intubation and the other is of the colostomy, those are to be mentioned separately. They are not going to be mentioned as or treated as injuries. Like for example, if there were 4 injuries, as I stated earlier, you are going to write injury number 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's it. The surgical intervention is to be mentioned under a separate subheading of surgical treatment or intervention, and they are to be written as finding number 1 and finding number 2. Like finding number 1, chest intubation hole; finding number 2, colostomy hole; finding number 3, the laparotomy incision. So that is the significance of the treatment notes and the medical legal certificate while writing the postmortem report. So these are the 6 documents that are to be provided to the doctor who is going to conduct the autopsy examination. Out of this, the first 3 are absolutely mandatory. You are not going to go ahead with the postmortem or autopsy examination if first 3 documents are not provided to you. The other 3, there are times that sometimes there's a weekend and the medical legal certificate, the death certificate or the treatment notes might not be available on the spot. Now these documents may follow later on after the weekend is over or any holiday is over, but still they are not going to be dispensed away with. They are to be provided by the police to the doctor for the complete autopsy report. Stay tuned in for the prerequisites of autopsy, and once again let me focus on this part, that if you take a screenshot of this slide, that covers your entire SEQ. If there's a 5 marks question and they ask you about the autopsy protocol, you just write these 6 points and you're going to get full marks, 5 out of 5. And the things that I've explained to you in between the lines are for the Viva. So take care, Allah Hafiz, keep watching and keep learning.